Franklin County Commissioners meeting, June 2nd, 2020.
Are we live?
Yes, we're good. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. Just clearing up some last-minute details on the AV capture. We are here for a regular Tuesday morning meeting on June 2nd. We have all three commissioners on board, Johnson and Karen here with the office. We do have an audience. And who do we have on the phone this morning?
You have Matt Mahoney with Franklin County Public Works. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, this is Matt Mahoney, Public Works Director.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep.
I believe Jen
Johnson.
Jen, thank you. Did I hear Sean also?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll call to order, and if you join me with the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you. Our first item on the agenda is approval of minutes, and we have two sets of minutes, May 19th and May 26th, and they were from...
Hold on a minute. Keith, is your live going?
Yeah, it's showing us just finishing the Pledge of Allegiance,
Okay.
so it's a delayed.
Jen, can you see the live?
Yeah, I might be a little bit behind Keith's live. They just finished the Pledge of Allegiance right now and sat down.
Okay, because there's a couple of people that cannot see it yet.
Okay. And I might actually be behind. I might have to let me see if I can speed it up. Yeah, I think I would just hit play last or late.
Okay. So with that, I think we have minutes from May 19th and May 26th. I think that were left over from our last meeting that we couldn't attend to. So any changes?
No changes, Mr. Chair. Approved.
Okay, we'll get those signed as approved. Well, Kyle, we'll try you again this morning and see if we can keep up with this technology.
Sounds good.
We're here for expanding funds to emergency housing program with the Human Services.
Yeah, so I came to you this morning to talk about using some of the dollars that we have in reserve to temporarily expand the emergency housing program. And so the emergency housing program is part of our homeless housing fund, which is supported by document recording fees. And the document recording fees filter into two funds, the affordable housing and the homeless housing. Affordable housing is for capital projects, and our steering committee met a couple of weeks ago, I think, and so we've issued an RFP for proposals, and at a later date I'll come before the board and talk with you about how those goes and if the steering committee recommends supporting any projects. But we're still maybe a month or so away from that. But the homeless housing fund, or you may have heard it referred to as the 2163, is for developing programs to fill gaps in services. And so typically I like to keep about a year's worth of revenue in the reserve for, if there are ever any drop in the funding. But the dollars that I came to talk with you about today and to see if the board is interested in authorizing the release of those funds, that's in excess of that. And so the fund generates a little over $500,000 a year, and we spend what we bring in. But I have, like I said, I have a bit of a reserve, kind of as a rainy day fund. Again, it seems like it's raining now, and so I anticipate the governor obviously had put a moratorium on evictions, but that's not going to get people out of paying their rent. They still have to pay their rent, and so typically with these funds, we get we work with the people that are literally homeless, get them, maybe get them a first month's rent and a deposit to get them into a unit, and then they go on from there. What we haven't had funds for are what's called eviction prevention, and people that, and I anticipate once things start ramping back up, we're going to have a lot of people that have been unemployed for the last several months, and they're going to call and they're going to be behind on their rent. I haven't heard anything from the governor's perspective on that. Obviously they have to pay their rent, but once the eviction moratorium is lifted, I don't know if they're going to have to pay it all at once if they haven't been working. It's going to create problems, and so that's what these funds are generated for, is for that kind of rental assistance. And so again, that's why I'm here, to see if the board is interested in releasing some additional funding on top of what we typically will release. They'll still have to meet all the program requirements. They have to be residents of the county. They have to have certain income limits. Again, I think because I think there have been a lot of people that have been laid off, I think we'll have more people that will be eligible for the program. But again, I just wanted to see what the board was interested in.
What was the dollar amount on this, Kyle?
I'm recommending $85,000 over the remainder of the year.
Okay.
So we budget that out for the remaining 6 months.
Okay. And that is excess from your normal rainy day quote fund?
Yeah, it's not going to hurt the reserve that I have. Again, I certainly could do additional funds if the board felt that was needed. Then it starts tapping into to the reserve. I tend to want to be a little bit more fiscally cautious and not expend all of the reserve.
Yeah.
So, Kyle, I think it's pretty good strategic planning on your part, and I think you're right. The demand will be there, and it'll benefit everybody to have the funds readily available. If it turns out, and hopefully we are wrong, that the demand isn't there and the need isn't there, would you envision simply moving these funds back or leave them there for a future rainy day?
I think what I'm proposing is that these funds be available until December 31st.
Okay.
If we don't use them, they stay in the account.
And that's fine. I just want to get a sense of what your plan was, but commend you on looking forward and anticipating. So
Kyle, you said that the allocated funds is $500,000 a year, correct?
Correct. We get a little more. 500, and I think we get about between 500 and 550 a year in revenue, and that's what we have allocated out to the program. So we essentially spend what we bring in. This is in excess of that's sitting in reserve.
Okay, so that's for the two programs of the affordable housing and the homeless housing.
Yeah, when the funds come to the county, they're split into the two funds, and there's additional funds in the affordable housing. Like I said, I'll come to you in the next month or two after we have after I have a recommendation on projects for that. They're just both supported by document recording fees. They split into the capital fund, which is the affordable housing, and the homeless housing, which is a more of a service
Equally
fund.
split?
No, the fund for the affordable housing, or homeless housing, I'm sorry, is greater. I don't have the exact dollar amount. I can certainly provide that to you, how much per document that's recorded goes into each fund.
So with the $85,000 coming out of the rainy day fund, what does that leave a balance in the rainy day fund?
About $500,000.
About $500,000.
Yeah.
The rainy day fund, how did we accumulate that much in the rainy day fund? Just year after year of taking a little bit and putting it in there? Or?
Yeah, and again, part of I have to report all the expenditures to the Department of Commerce.
Okay.
And so when we get other grants like our Consolidated Homeless Grant, it's for specific needs with the intention that these funds will help fill gaps. So some of the other things that we do with the fund is we help provide some support to the domestic violence shelter for operations. We help with My Friend's Place, the youth shelter, and then we've developed these programs based on gaps that we have. We have a mental health housing program. We have a disabled housing program. I came several months ago to talk about the young adult housing program. And so when we identify gaps that the dollars that come from the state aren't addressing, the state's very restrictive in what we can do with those dollars. They essentially tell us how we're going to spend them, and then we try and identify other areas of needs with our local dollars and address them that way.
Because I was just at a virtual meeting for the emergency food and shelter, and there was money given both to the My Friend's Place and the domestic violence housing. Money went from that to these organizations also. So I truly believe that $85,000 isn't going to help the amount of people that are going to need assistance.
Like with all of these programs, the need far outweighs the available resources.
We have no idea what this has done to our community until we get down the road a little bit further.
Yeah, I think the reality is that we're going to have people call us and ask for assistance that we're not going to be able to help because we don't have the funding.
So they're going to get evicted.
But what we do, and that's a possibility. What we do is we prioritize, and we have a screening tool that we ask a number of questions: household size, income, disabilities, a whole slew of things, and then we try to provide assistance to the most needy. Do we catch everyone? No, unfortunately, we don't.
If there's no further questions, I'd entertain a motion to authorize Resolution 2020-129.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, John.
Well, it took 2 weeks to do that.
We got it done.
Yeah. Okay, we need a technical recess again this morning. About 10 minutes at this point.
I think that would take us.
Okay, we've used our 10-minute recess, but IT is still fighting the problem, so we'll go in additional 10 minutes. Let's go to 9:45 instead. It'll be 14 minutes. Thank you. This is 9:45. We're back in after our 2 recesses to open meeting. Our next item on the agenda is ordinance for relocation of sales tax subject to House Bill 1406. Keith, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hopefully you will remember that last year, the 2019 legislature adopted some changes to the sales tax allocation that allowed local jurisdictions to pass local ordinances that would allow a greater share of the state portion of the sales tax to be allocated back to the county to be used for affordable housing. It's many of the same programs that Kyle just spoke about regarding the last issue. In that legislation, it was required that the local governments first pass a resolution expressing their intent to ultimately adopt an ordinance to the effect of allowing Franklin County to move forward with that. We adopted that resolution last fall. This is the follow-up piece of legislation from the county to officially adopt the ordinance. What it really does is allow a greater portion of the sales tax generated in Franklin County to ultimately be retained by the county. It still is collected by the state, but then it's remitted back to the county. So it doesn't increase the sales tax to the consumer or the retailer that's collecting it. It just provides additional revenues back to the county to be used for specific programs. In this case, housing assistance for homeless housing and affordable housing within Franklin County. So that's
this is separate from the .09 money,
yes.
Obviously. Then
yes, this is just a sales tax reallocation from the state.
Okay. Questions, commissioners?
A couple of observations, Mr. Chair. While I support and in the past have supported funding for homeless housing needs, recognizing that it's a benefit to our citizens and that there are other costs that accrue to counties and cities and municipalities when we don't provide these services. People end up living in doorways in our emergency rooms and other places. So there are real costs separate and aside from the humanitarian aspect. And I appreciate Mr. Johnson pointing out that this is not a new tax. It does not increase the tax. But what it does do, I believe, is supplant or move where our tax dollars get used. Recognizing that the state only has a set amount of tax dollars that they will collect in any given year, and realizing that out of the 8.6% that's charged in Franklin County, the first 6.5% goes directly to the state, which they apportion back to us in one fashion or another. As we've often said, the state has no money to give us but that which they've taken from us in the first place. And so my only concern with this one would be that out of the 6.5% that the state is taking, if they apportion a larger share to homeless, what other accounts do we receive money back from the state from that will be reduced as a result? I think it's simple math that that's an inevitable outcome, and they've not spoken to that point. Combined with the fact that Kyle told us earlier that the funds that we previously approved this morning are in excess of a year's worth of reserves, I think it at least bears asking the question, what other sales tax dollars that would normally flow back from the state for program A, B, C, and D will in fact get supplanted or moved over into the homeless side. Kyle, if you've got any thoughts on that, I'd be more than happy to hear them. I don't think it's enough of a concern, frankly, given the total dollars involved, for me to oppose it. But I do want to raise awareness and the principle of the fact that this is not extra tax revenue that's being apportioned. It's coming from somewhere. And so which of our programs will be shorted for this to happen?
Yeah, and I asked that question. It didn't get a response.
Well, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, and I think it's a small amount. It's a 0.073%. So it's and I think the main difference, quite frankly, between this and like the 2060 fund is that it allows for individuals that are at 60% the AMI. So it's not, people that are on state assistance, it's people that are working, trying to get ahead, but don't make much money. And so there's a little bit difference with regard to that. But
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. You bring up a good point. I don't have an answer for that, but I did ask.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the fact that you asked. Excuse me. And as I just said a minute ago, the total raw dollar amount is small enough that it's not sufficient for me to oppose. I just want to raise awareness that when the state says they're giving us something, there's almost always a backside price somewhere, and we should always be vigilant about that. Thanks.
So
I'm sorry, I was just going to add that it's not a direct answer to your Commissioner Peck's question, which is the right question. Sales taxes up until mid-April, of course, were increasing. The state was receiving a significant increase in total revenue, and the intent, I believe, of the legislature and the governor was to allocate some of that increase towards more affordable housing. Clearly, homelessness and affordable housing was a problem on the west side, as well as in certain sections of the east side. But that's not like I said, a direct answer. They could have allocated those funds to any number of programs at the state level, exercise their discretion to move more of this towards housing issues.
Commissioner Didier?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Keith if he knew the answer to that, being that he's presenting this to us, but it says that there is hereby imposed by this ordinance the maximum capacity of sales tax and use tax of .0146.
Yeah,
I think that the city of Pasco is only doing the .0073.
And so the maximum amount allowed.
The maximum allowed is
The maximum allowed is the .0146, and so the county can collect that in the county.
Unincorporated area.
Unincorporated areas. The city of Pasco chose to participate in this also. So essentially, what will happen is the county and the city will split the .0146, and the city will collect .073.
0073.
Thank you.
In the city.
In the city, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the county will collect the .0073 in the city, but the .0146 in the other area. That makes sense. That was a lot of.
The 0073 is half of the 14.6.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, Pasco and Franklin County will split that.
Yeah, I remember
maximum amount.
when it first came out, if Pasco didn't sign their ordinance for it, the county would have gotten the whole portion.
That's
Correct.
But
correct.
seeing as how the city of Pasco did, it made a split between county and city.
Correct. And because the amounts are so small in real dollars, the cities of Mesa and Colotis and Connell opted not to collect their half of the .014. Yeah.
And this is a redirection of funds. So I pose the same question that Commissioner Peck posed. Where are we going to be depleted? I think we need to know where we're going to lose funds before we allocate them, because in this time, our sales tax revenues are down.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to get a direct answer from the state, because that requires the legislature to make a one-for-one trade. And their expectation was, because sales taxes were increasing at the gross amount, they could have directed those additional revenues to any number of state programs, but chose to carve out this piece specifically for homeless housing in the state, and to allow local governments to have more say on that. But I don't think you could say, because of this, that funding for Department of Fish and Wildlife or the Department of Agriculture or Department of Transportation or somebody else that may have received sales tax revenues is now going to receive a one-to-one reduction in their allocated budget from the state.
So obviously this was done when we were in the booming economy that Trump.
Flush, yeah.
Now we're allocating this when we are looking at deficits, and I don't think this is a proper time to be allocating more funds when we don't even know if we're going to be able to satisfy our budget here in the courthouse.
Well taken point. I would just say that if we don't exercise this option, the state keeps the money. If they're, that 0.014% stays with Olympia, they will decide where it goes.
So actually, again, the state's telling us how to spend our money. It's our money. They collected it. They give it back to us, and they dictate us how we're going to spend it.
That's fair.
They don't give us back the 6.5 they take.
Right.
They give us a few crumbs out of the 6.5. Yeah. The question is whether or not the number of crumbs will be reduced. And given that it's a relatively small dollar amount in context, and the fact that Kyle's already given us information that demand for these services will be up as a result of the current situation, I can see my way to supporting it. I just, again, want to air out the principle that they don't have anything but that which they first take from us, and two, that they give us back what they choose. And I think there may be an offset here, but there's no guarantee that there would be. And frankly, if they did give it back to us, they might give us back to us in something that we would consider a lower priority than this. So it's one of those situations where we don't have the benefit of complete information, nor are we ever going to have that from the state.
I'm not
they
mistaken,
don't know.
if we don't take this, that Pasco is liable to take it all?
Pasco would have had to enact a qualifying local tax, which would be a new tax, and they're not doing that. So they'll collect they'll collect their half, and so then the county has a choice to collect theirs.
Yeah, okay.
The-
I couldn't remember how that broke out. I remember the discussion
Yeah,
a number of months ago, but
The county could collect the whole amount if the city chose not to participate, but
not the other.
the city would have to, and if the city would have enacted a qualifying local tax, and there were 4 taxes that would qualify, then regardless of whether the county wanted to opt in or not, the city would have collected those funds. But that would have been a new tax, and they weren't interested in doing that, so they'll collect their allotted half.
okay. With that, we've got an ordinance 03-2020 upon approval.
Kyle, one other question. Have you taken the opportunity to calculate what this is in real dollars?
It's, yeah.
Ballpark.
And if you include ballpark around 300 a year, 300,000. Probably be a little bit less than that, because I don't know when you factor out the city's portion. I think with the city of Pasco in there, it was in the mid 300s, and so with it out, I think it would probably be below that.
Well, I understand that 2/3 of the county population is in the city of Pasco.
Yeah.
So you can take 1/3 of that, which would be the unincorporated county, that would be 100, and then half of the remainder. So potentially 175, 200,000 for the county.
Right.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chairman, being cognizant of the fact that if we don't take these funds for local housing programs, so far as we know, they may be used for the new archives project in Olympia or some other lower priority. With that, I would move for approval of Ordinance 03-2020 as presented.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you both.
Thank you, Kyle. It's good discussion.
Our time on the agenda for public comment. We have some public in the office today, and also the phones are open at I think everybody can see them, 509-546-5859.
Mr. Chairman, if I may interrupt just briefly, I want to first thank the members of the public that are here today, Mr. Dockstader and Mr. Mullen, and I want to recognize the public's right and need to participate in our commissioner meetings. Having said that, it's basically following up just on the discussion we just had about being subject to the edicts of Olympia. One of the requirements for our meeting is that either all of the public needs to be able to participate equally or none of the public can participate equally. And so in the future, we're unfortunately, until these restrictions of the pandemic are lifted, will not be able to allow members of the public into this meeting room because we simply can't accommodate all of the public that wants to attend. And so I apologize to Mr. Dockstader and Mr. Mullen if we haven't made that clear. I don't want to restrict their ability to participate or anybody else's, but it's going to be important that we enforce that practice until all of the public is available to participate in person as opposed to simply being online. So I need to caution the board that we run the risk of being challenged on Open Public Meetings Act issues if the public is not equally treated with respect to their participation in the board meetings.
Thank you, Keith.
And with that, we don't have any callers on the line at the moment.
Okay.
We may get some.
Public comment?
Is there any way then to, Matt Beaton, is there any way then to open the thing with the availability and the distancing, to at least the capacity of the room? I mean, the one thing that I've heard when I'm out and about is that, people are wondering, when they can come to these meetings again. There's a lot of, obviously their government is coming down on them like they never have. And I understand there's limitations on space, but is there any reason that the board wouldn't consider, saying, look, we have 8 seats, 10 seats on a first come, first served basis? Is that, I guess my question would be, just like the mask issue, which is what I'm interested in today, this thing that's come down, and we're saying it's an edict from the governor, but I'm going to listen to you as a board with regard to this building, and not necessarily the governor who would hand it down and not have the same interest in this building as you 3 gentlemen would. And so that's what I'm looking for. Hopefully that if you guys decide, if the governor says on the 8th, there's the common sense out there. People don't get it. This started on the 29th, and now we're going to put masks on the 8th, and the curve is flattened. So, and in my office, they're asking, what do we do? People are looking for guidance and leadership, and I'm hoping, if it's left to me, I'll continue to do what we've done since our office opened when you opened, and then you closed again in a few days. But we have basically been operating and providing services at a level. And I would ask the same thing with consistency here, is that people can come to the auditor's office, but they can't come to this meeting. Now, I get the capacity issue. But, people still come in one-off, and they wait in line, and they distance, and we practice these things. But I guess that's what I would ask for you to consider today is no, not just open the thing up and everybody sit next to each other, but to do what everyone else is doing, and that is facilitate to the extent of prudent government. So, and hopefully you'll comment on the masks as well.
Mr. Chairman, I just offer a note for consideration. The Open Public Meetings Act doesn't apply to people visiting offices in the courthouse, be it the treasurer's office, the clerk, the auditor, but it does apply to public meetings like this, and there's an equity argument with respect to access, even embodied in the state's constitution. So whatever we choose to do, it needs to be equitable, and we would quickly enter the realm of also having to dedicate spaces specifically for disabled persons and access issues. And not saying it can't be done, not saying it shouldn't be done, just saying that it's a more complicated scenario than it might first appear.
Further comments?
Yeah, after that line of garbage, I got a whole lot of them. This is our government. We elected you people. You should be listening to us whether you want to or not. Doesn't mean you're going to do what we ask or what we say, but we have the right to be here to voice our opinion. And if you can't do it here, move it to track. If you can't find enough room to sit 50 people in track, then there's a problem. I've never seen 50 people here except for the one night. And that is just pure garbage as far as I'm concerned to keep the public out, because some of us don't have the computers and the capability of going to a public meeting virtually. And I tried it the first time. I waited online for 20 minutes and never heard one comment made from the public when the public comment period was supposed to start at 9:15. So I finally got tired because I had other work to do and hung up. Never did get to speak. And it's just irritating to me that the governor thinks he could shut the public out from our representative government, which is what you three are, our representatives, and we should have the right to speak to you and come in here and make public comment on different things and matters before the county. Now, on to other items, I appreciate that Mr. Sullivan's got a $500,000 surplus sitting over there for the homeless and the veterans housing deal. And I realize, being involved in real estate, all the problems we've got coming down the road. But if my understanding was that we're going to get an extra $300,000 from the state government for the housing fund, is that correct?
It's based off the sales tax.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so it will likely be less than that.
But it'd be 200. If we're going to get $200,000 extra, and we got a $500,000 surplus, then let's take the money and have them return $200,000 out of last year's budget to the county to be used for other projects, because we're sure as hell going to be a whole lot more committees and different organizations coming here wanting money because there's no money out there because the people have been sitting home. And I know I asked this about 3 weeks ago. Do we even have an idea where we're at as far as income for the county?
Want me to respond to that?
Please.
Yes, we do. As of the end of March, we don't have the sales tax information from the state lags about 2 months, so it'll be next month before we have a real good idea of what's happened since the COVID shutdown. Preliminary numbers suggest that we're going to be lower, but details of that are still being waited upon from Olympia.
Well, I think that there needs to be a serious look at this year's budget, a revisit. The organization I belong to, we're meeting in June and July to rewrite our budget because of the shortfall of income. And we're just one little part of the bi-county area. And I think both counties are going to be sucking swamp water when it gets down to real income coming in, and should be looking at redoing part of the budget on where do we cut to make this up. I mean, we've already cut $2 million out of the road system. And I've got one other subject I'd like to talk about today. been involved in the new comp plan for the county growth management area, and there has been no consideration by the bureaucrats in the city or the state on real improvements east-west transportation throughout the county. And I know that's going to be coming before you guys here this year, they think, because they're ramrodding it through. It doesn't matter what the public says or what their comments are. The planning department is going to try and jam this down everybody's throats so they can get it out of their hair. But when it does come up, I think the county commissioners need to look at the traffic patterns that are out there. I know on Self Landing Road where I live, the traffic count is horrendous anymore, and there's nobody going to town to eat or shop. I mean, it's just traffic from people working and going back and forth out there in the county, and with the increased area that they're taking in, that's going to be a bigger increase, and the county's going to have to end up doing something to Clark Road, Self Landing Road, and Sagemore Road to handle all the cross traffic that's coming out of another 50,000 people moving into Franklin County over the next 20 years. And that's all I have to say today. I appreciate the time and the ability to address you. Thank you.
Thank you, George.
So, Keith, could I ask Keith a question on that, on the subjects? Is there a possibility that with that money coming into the homeless, that the funds could be reallocated that are in the homeless from us, or does it have to stay there?
Yeah, those are restricted. They have to be spent on the intended purpose of the fund.
Just to answer that question.
Yeah.
Anybody on the phone, Keith?
Yes, we do have, I believe, one caller on the line. Good morning. Is this Julia?
Hey, good morning. Yes, it is. Hi, how are you?
Good. This is Keith Johnson, and you are online now with the Franklin County Board of Commissioners.
Awesome. Good morning, Commissioners. Again, just as you have it stated in your minutes, but it's Julia Thatcher with Keeper. And my question for you is, now that all the counties are eligible to apply for what Franklin County plans to apply?
Hey, Julia, hold on just a second. We're getting feedback. Can you turn off your microphone or your speakers?
Yes. Can you hear me better now?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Now that all counties in the state can apply for phase 2 of the reopening plan, what's Franklin County's plan moving forward?
That's. I'll respond to that.
Please.
Board's approval here. We are on the verge of discussing that in just a few minutes, actually. I would anticipate that the board's going to make every effort to move Franklin County to phase 2 as quickly as possible. We still have some improvements to make in our infection rate numbers and our ability to test that we're working closely with the Benton Franklin Health District on. But I think it's fair to say that we are very eager to move to additional phases as quickly as possible to get the county opened up again.
And I apologize if there's just a pause as I take these notes. I know that this morning Benton County Commissioners announced that they will be applying for phase 2. I know that they are also not close to those guidance for infection rates. similar to how Franklin County is. They're probably, I think, seeing a little bit more cases of the coronavirus at this point. Do you guys have any intention of applying for phase 2 before meeting those specific guidelines laid out by the governor?
The governor made some statements last week that seemed to indicate that counties are being given a little more flexibility in their application, that the metrics that are stated for the various phases are targets but may not be hard and fast. In other words, if you're doing real well in one area and not quite as well in another, the Department of Health at the state level will look at the overall statistics of the county in making that determination of whether to approve a variance. So I don't think, at least philosophically, that we're very far apart from where Benton County is. Obviously, we operate a joint health district for the Tri-Cities area, and it's a singular economy in the sense that Franklin County citizens do a lot of shopping and working in Benton County and vice versa. So what affects one county is going to affect the other one pretty closely. But having said that, we recognize that they are two separate counties, and Franklin County will operate the best we can to open Franklin County as quickly as we can.
Awesome. And I have one last question for you, and it may come as you discuss this after. Is there a timeline right now by the end of the week that you might apply, or anything concrete right now for residents in the county? You know, exactly what you say, it's hard when Benton County is applying, but Franklin County, you know, it's just as, you know, we run so connected between the two counties, so it's just is 100% what affects one county affects the other.
Yeah. Julia, I apologize. This is really a public comment period for you to make a statement to the board. I'm more than happy to have an interview with you following the meeting. I probably have actually better answers for you at that time because the board would have then had an opportunity to discuss it as a board. So I don't want to cut you off, but I do feel like we need to kind of move along here. If you want to have a follow-up conversation, I'm happy to do that.
Hey, of course. Hey, I appreciate it, and I appreciate your time. And being a resident of the area, you know, grateful to be able to participate both as media and also as a resident. So I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anything further on the phone? Anything further in the office? Public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to pay bills.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, we have 3 items this morning. 2 are fund expenditures. 1 is payroll. I'll note that I'll do the first one is one from last week, which you approved provisionally, and so today's approval would ratify that previous authorization. So move for approval of fund expenditures in a total amount of $421,693.84. Note that this has been reviewed and signed off by the county administrator and 2 representatives of the county auditor's office.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next, Mr. Chairman, fund expenditures for the current cycle. Move for approval as presented in a total amount of $168,898.35. And note that this, too, has been reviewed and signed off by the county administrator and 2 representatives from the auditor's office.
I second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye. And lastly, Mr. Chairman, salary clearing payroll and emergency management payroll. Move for approval as presented in a total amount of $978,708.72. Again, for the record, that's $978,708.72. Note that this has been reviewed and signed off by 2 representatives of the auditor's office.
I second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That leads us to the consent agenda. We have items 1 through 6 on the consent agenda this morning.
Mr. Chairman, move for approval of the consent agenda with 6 items as presented. I don't have any that I want to pull separately, but certainly happy to entertain discussion.
I second with discussion on items 3 and 4.
So noted. Discussion?
So Kyle, could I, the first is the temporary increase to the Veterans Fund, and again, I'm coming to you to ask, you want to increase the benefits to $1,000 per veteran per month?
Increase an additional $1,000 until the end of the year, and so for eligible vets. And so,
oh, it's just $1,000 for all the vets per month?
We have about 100 vets that will access the fund at a given time.
Okay.
And so they have an allotment of $1,200 per 12 months. And so this
per month, $1,200 a month for 12 months.
$1,200 per 12 months. So in a rolling 12 months, essentially in a year, they can access up to $1,200
each vet.
Each eligible vet.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it can go to receive food. They can pay
rent,
gasoline.
Yeah, any of those kinds of things that they're outlined within the policy.
Okay.
And so this is just a request, again, in response to the circumstances that we're all in right now with COVID-19 and the essentially shutting down of the county. This is in response to that and just allowing them to have an additional benefit between now and the end of the year for rental assistance if needed, for additional food, for any of the identified items within the policy.
So if I understand you correctly, then it's going to go from $1,200 a month or for the year to $2,200 for the remainder of the year.
Correct.
Okay. That's what.
So, excuse me, I'd like to just clarify on that point because I heard something a little different. So current authorization is $1,200 total for the full year.
Correct.
And this would change it to $2,200 for the full year.
The remainder.
Till the end of the year.
I understand. Hear me out. I understand that it ends at the end of the year, but it is $2,200 for the full year, not the remaining year.
Correct.
Okay. It's a subtle but could be important distinction depending on how much somebody has drawn and so forth. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So it's an additional $1,000 for the remainder of the year that will be added to it. So it's an increase of that divided by 6 months.
Right.
Okay. What is the total funds in the Veteran Fund right now? What's remaining?
As of April, we had $319,000 in the fund.
Okay.
And in 2019, the fund brought in $115,000.
It's bringing in $115 every year.
Yes.
Where's the threshold that the tax has got to be decreased if we go over that threshold?
I'm sorry, Commissioner, I can't think of that off the top of my head. I can certainly get that for you.
Yeah. I was wondering if we were there with that much money in the account, seeing that it sat for 10 years before we had a board put in place.
And it's not a matter of it's a requirement that it be decreased when it gets to a certain amount. It's the board has the ability to if they choose to.
Yeah, to reduce it. Okay, that's all I have on that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, point of clarification, I think the term that was used was that leaves $1,000 divided by the remaining 6 months, and that's precisely the point I was trying to make, is that if someone has not drawn anything yet, they would still have their full $2,200 eligibility for the remainder of the year, correct?
Correct.
So it's not $1,000 additional divided by 6 months. It's an additional $1,000 per account, and depending on how much they've drawn so far, it could be more or less throughout the end of the year. So just wanted to clarify that for any vets that are listening. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Item 4?
Yeah, this would be Carly.
Take your seat, Kyle.
I don't think he's going to fight you for it.
Probably not.
Okay, Carly, so on this here, I'm just looking over this Family Medical Leave Act, and you're going through this and you're rewriting this because you made comment in here that the existing Family and Medical Leave Act, adopted in 2016, why still a good policy, is overly complicated and burdensome. It contains a lot of redundant statutory language and reads more like a disclaimer than a policy meant to help employees and managers understand their rights and responsibilities under the law. So all you're doing is abbreviating it down.
We're boiling down the policy to what people really need to know. The statutory framework still exists, and we will still administer the leaves with that, but it was overly complicated from a county policy standpoint.
And you also mentioned in here that there are 2 new additional, due to the coronavirus, there's 2 additional.
There are 2 additional leave enhancements that were put into place by Congress under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act.
Mm-hmm. And those run out at the end of 2020, December 31st.
At this point, they sunset.
They sunset. Okay, just to make that clear, that they sunset at the end of 2020 unless Congress passes another one before the end of the year.
Correct, and so I would anticipate that I would bring forward an updated policy reflecting where we're at in January.
That's basically what I wanted to make sure the public knew what was going on here, what we were adding, and when it sunsets. So yes. Thank you.
Okay. With that, we have on the table consent agenda 1 through 6.
We've got a motion and a second with discussion.
All in favor?
Aye.
That leads us to you, Keith, please.
A couple of items for the board to discuss. As the reporter from KEPR asked about kind of the plans for the county going forward with a couple of things. In the CARES Act, there was allocated to Franklin County an award of $5,207,400. It's a substantial amount of money. There are some significant restrictions on how that money can be used. Generally speaking, it is for necessary public health emergency expenditures. I've been in communication with Jason and Rick over at the Benton Franklin Health District to get some information from them. They are putting that together. That will be the largest expenditure that we have, are the additional expenditures that they have related to the COVID-19 response. The auditor's office here is capturing additional expenses that we have incurred directly in county departments and agencies. I don't expect that number to be very large. We've bought some masks, some personal protection equipment. We've installed some plexiglass barriers in certain places. So we will have some level of expenditure, but I don't expect that to be a very material item as of yet. One of the things that you cannot do with this money is supplant lost revenue. So if our sales taxes are down, or if for some reason property taxes were to come down, we would not be able to substitute that into the budget for those lost revenues. We would in fact have to still curtail our budget to meet our revenues. It has to apply to expenditures related to COVID-19 between the period of March 1st of this year, so we can go back and capture costs that we incurred early in the onset of this restriction through October 31st, and October 31st gives us time to have a complete reconciliation before the end of the year, which is required by Congress. So the State Department of Commerce has established October 31st as the cutoff date for, which means if we were to attempt to have a large capital expenditure, for example, go buy a building to move people to, that would be possible to do, but if we were to try to build something, it'd have to be completed by October 31st. So capital expenditures are going to be pretty difficult given the time frame to use this money for. So even though there's a substantial amount of money, I think realistically it's going to be difficult for us to try to spend all of that between now and October 31st. And I think clearly our goal is not just to spend the money, but it really needs to be to respond to the emergency. It also must be for items that were not included in the annual budget. So, our normal employee salaries and those kinds of things, even though we may have employees working on COVID-19 type issues that may be part of their job description to do so, and we would not offset that through this kind of funding. So there are some significant restrictions. The first step is getting a contract in place with the Department of Commerce. I'm in the process of putting that together, and that should be, I think, submitted this week. And then as departments and agencies capture their costs, we will basically ask for reimbursement from these funds. One of the things that we're looking at exploring, I received a request for consideration from the Tri-City Regional Chamber of Commerce, and seeing what other counties and units of government across the country are doing with some of their CARES Act funding, which I think is a worthy suggestion. I want the board to consider it as we move forward. And that is helping small businesses through some of this. They are looking at a program awarding what they call micro grants. These are amounts usually less than $50,000 for small businesses in the Tri-Cities area. They're asking Benton County to participate, and they're asking us to participate as well with our CARES Act funding to help these small businesses that have been affected by the COVID-19 response. And clearly, as has been discussed already today, small businesses are probably one of those areas that's hurting the most because of the closures and lost income that they've experienced. So with a grant program that the Tri-City Chamber already pretty much has the infrastructure in place to manage a grant program. They've identified the business owners. They know who they are. They have contact with them. They have access to their financial statement information, the things that they would typically need in a grant application process. Would allow, if we were to do this, would allow us not to have to recreate that infrastructure here at the county. We don't really have a grant awarding process. We apply for grants from the federal and state government, but we really have not instituted a process of awarding grants to other entities. And so I'm recommending that we strongly consider something like that using not only the regional chamber, but TriDec and Visit Tri-Cities that are working to enhance businesses here in the community and get them open. So we will have some opportunities to consider those types of approaches to how we use our CARES Act funding. In the same vein, we got the question today, and I want to be able to respond to that, is what is our plan going forward with respect to applying for a variance to move us towards additional phases that the governor has outlined. Our numbers reflect that we're not currently meeting the metric for rates of infection, and that is probably the biggest hurdle that we still have yet to overcome to be confident that we could secure an approval to move to phase 2. I understand that Benton County was considering their options this morning. I don't know for sure. The comment we heard from the reporter is that Benton County has approved their or instructed their county, my counterpart, their county administrator, to move forward with developing that application. I've spoken with the folks at the health district and let them know that that's probably our intent as well, is to, as soon as we can, request variances to allow more businesses to open, to allow more construction activity to take place. The governor, as you probably know, Friday made some additional changes, basically ended the Stay Home, Stay Healthy program, and has now moved to the kind of a newer model. The phased approach is still in place, but it sounds like the counties have more latitude in pushing for those, moving through those phases. They adopted new rules for religious gatherings, for example, and have opened that up a little bit more. Clearly, we have a long way to go, but my recommendation again is to pursue as quickly as possible economic activity that allows these businesses to open back up and use the social distancing and rules of trying to flatten the curve, as they say, and trust our business owners to be able to do that safely within the community. So it's kind of a high-level view. I'm happy to answer questions, and probably more of a discussion. I'm not asking for specific action to be taken or a vote taken by the board this morning unless there's obvious, disagreement about something. But I think based on our prior conversations, we're all in pretty much agreement that we feel these restrictions are onerous and causing challenges for our citizens and business owners, and would like to see that turned around as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Well, I can support, applying for a variance. I have, I guess, one question that actually needs to go to the health department. I know at one time I heard they had plenty of test kits available, and then the other day I heard they didn't have enough to sign the variance. So I'm getting two different thoughts out of the same district.
I have the same question. I don't have the answer to that yet. I think it's the rate of testing as opposed to having the testing capacity, that there may be a distinction there that is causing that. But I looked at the data yesterday, and it would appear that our testing capability is not in the zone of meeting that standard yet.
And, Mr. Chairman, just a quick insert here. Reading from the state's guidelines with respect to testing, counties need to show they have adequate testing capacity, 50 times as many people per day as they have confirmed new cases per day. There's been some confusion about whether it's capacity or actual tests administered, and that answers that question.
Availability of the equipment. It sounds like they had the availability of the equipment, just not the capacity to do the testing.
Well, capacity can mean a lot of things. It can be kits, it can be personnel time, it can be, yeah.
So, Keith, the CARES Act came from the federal government, okay? And you're telling me the State Department of Commerce is the one that's putting down all the stipulations on the CARES Act that we're going to receive?
Congress allocated it to the states and left the states with the responsibility of allocating it to local governments.
And that's the State Department of Commerce that's doing this?
Yes.
And they're putting stipulations on us?
I don't think they're putting any stipulations on us that are not already in the CARES Act at the congressional level. Their process is creating quite a bit of work for them by having all of these contractual requirements. But they're probably, in fairness, I think they probably are having some restrictions in addition to what Congress has placed on it, but they're fairly limited.
Because in order to get into phase 2, we have to comply with this new mask rule in the courthouse. Is this correct?
Yeah, that's my understanding. Is that effective Monday, June 8th, that employers are expected to ask their employees in certain situations, probably not in everyone, if they're not dealing with the public or with other workers around them, they may not be required to wear a mask. But generally speaking, public employees are considered employees like every other private business and would be required to follow the social distancing and mask rule.
So, as a representative republic, a government of laws, there's no law put in place by our legislature about having to wear a mask.
I may ask Jennifer to offer a more descriptive legal opinion, understanding the entire infrastructure of representative government is that the governor, who presumably has been elected by the people of Washington, has certain powers given to him by the legislature, one of which is to enact emergency provisions and place restrictions on us. I don't disagree with you or anybody else that says that Governor Inslee's been overreaching and that these, as Mr. Beaton pointed out earlier, not all of them make sense to me, and I can't justify, explain, or don't care to try to defend the governor's actions, but legally I'm responsible to follow what has been passed by the legislature and the governor.
Because on May 26th, he did an interview, and the interview was very revealing that the governor does not want to waste this opportunity to push his Green New Deal and to restart our economy with the Green New Deal. This interview was, and it's him saying it. So, I mean, as a representative republic, we're elected, and we are the legislative and the executive branch of Franklin County. And if we can't challenge this governor, then who can? We're elected by our constituents to uphold the Constitution. Our Constitution's been thrown under the bus, state and federal. And if we can't challenge the governor, then how is a simple man out there trying to defend his business going to challenge him? And this is what we need to do at Franklin County. We need to challenge him on his hidden agenda here of pushing a communist plan of a Green New Deal. And I think we need to challenge it. And we need to challenge it now.
I don't care to be in a position to defend or attack, for that matter, the governor's political agenda. I think there are a number of choices to be made about how you go about challenging the governor and those decisions, and that's really a decision for the board to decide. From my perspective as the county administrator, don't feel like I have the authority nor would I recommend that I independently act without the guidance of the board. And
the buck stops here,
the
three of us.
My recommendation has always been that I feel obligated to follow the county's legal counsel with respect to placing us at risk in terms of a liability towards a lawsuit as a plaintiff that we could not, in good conscience, pursue, nor as a defendant risk damages to the being paid by the county for an item that our risk pool has already pretty much stated that they would not support or defend. So I feel like my obligation to protect the resources of the county are such that I'm required to follow the guidance of legal counsel.
More thoughts?
Well, I have a couple I guess I would offer. Let's start with the obvious. There's a little over $5 million available. Sounds like short of buying a facility that would be directly tied to COVID response, we'd be unlikely to use those funds, but we certainly ought to look around and see if there is such an opportunity. That's a whole other discussion. I do want to point out that there may be an opportunity here for us to improve public participation in meetings if we were to consider using these CARES funds to rent the HAPO Center. You could take as large a room as you need and space the chairs as much as you need, and normally we avoid that because it being a separate financial center, we can't use it without compensation. Here we have funds that could be used to pay for that, pay for the security, pay for the whole facility if needed. So that we ought to consider. With respect to the chamber and the grant program, TRIDAC has been identified as our economic development agent. That is tangential to this issue. It's related, but it's not spot on. If we were to entertain providing funds for that grant program out of our CARES funding or other coronavirus funding, I would certainly want to make sure that they came back to this board for final approval such that we can ensure that they truly are Franklin County interests. And because government that's closest to the people best knows the needs of the people, generally speaking. And then lastly, I suppose I would point out that the duty of this board is not to wage political warfare with the governor. And I bring that up because I don't think there's a commissioner sitting up here that is a fan of the governor or his actions. And everything we do, directly or indirectly, has the potential to impact how the state government responds to the needs of the citizens of the county. Certainly not advocating for cowering in a corner. I didn't do that on active duty in the Middle East. I'm not going to do it here now. So don't get confused about that. It's about the fact that our only real duty is the best interest of the citizens of the county. And everything that we do needs to be focused on how we get the best outcome. Much as I would like to poke and probe at the governor and make fun of his Green New Deal and his other socialist agendas, which I think it's entirely plausible that that's exactly where his mindset is, I don't think that ought to be my focus. My focus is figuring out how we move forward with some sort of a reopen plan that gets us as much as possible for the citizens of Franklin County without having it turned around and sent back to us over and over and over and over, delaying what we're trying to accomplish, which is reopening. So I support a proposal to move to phase 2, phase 1.5, whichever we can justify. But let's not lose sight of the fact that the end game, the bottom line is, how do we get the best outcome for the citizens as quickly as possible? And engaging in a sparring match with the people in Olympia, I think, risks delaying that. We've got a set of rules. We need to do our best to live within them, make the best case that we possibly can for going to 1.5 or 2. And remember that this still has to go to the health department, and we are still looking for the endorsement from the public health doctor, who I'm guessing is not a huge fan of the Board of Health these days. Maybe, I don't want to speak for her. But we need to win that support as well, because I believe fully that the State Secretary of Health, Mr. Weisman, is going to look closely at whether or not the local health officials, the health physician, endorses our application. So to be clear, I'm not taking shots at anybody or anybody's ideas. I'm expressing my own point of view here. But let's absolutely stay focused on the quickest, best outcome for the citizens, and we'll deal with the governor and politics at the ballot box. Thanks.
So, Keith, on this CARES Act money, how can we not associate people, Family Medical Leave Act, using those funds, people staying at home, working from home, the business of the courthouse is not being conducted like it usually is. How can we not associate that with COVID? It affected us. It had a direct impact on our courthouse. How can we not use those funds for those type of situations? And the one thing I heard from the last Department of Health, Board of Health meeting was that one of the Benton County Commissioners wants to give a lot of this CARES Act to the health department. Now, the one thing that Senator Schessler told me when I talked to him here not too long ago was the amount of power that the Department of Health has in our state, and they're unelected officials, and they have more power, his quote, they have more power than the elected legislature that is elected to Olympia. Now, how do we deal with giving more money to a Department of Health when it has more power than our legislature? I am not in favor of giving any money to the Department of Health.
Are you talking about the State Department of Health or the Benton
All
Franklin
the
Health
Department of Health, the local and the state. And Jerome Delvin talked about giving more to the local Department of Health.
Health district. It's
Health
not a
district.
Department of Health.
Health district.
Yeah.
I'm not for that. I don't want to use any of the CARES Act personally. I do not. I'll vote against that.
That would be the largest single use of this CARES Act funding would be to the Benton Franklin Health District.
It's going to give them more power, more employees, more of what I went down and did that interview with Leo down there, where they called him and he said that they handed the phone off to somebody else. They were demanding him to take the park benches out in front of his store, and he puts up the flag to let the people know he's open. They wanted him to box off his 4 booths that he put in there just to make it look like an atmosphere. Nobody sits down and eat, and then he had 4 phone calls, or 2 people came in, 2 people called. And, I'm looking at this, I'm going, within 2 hours of that call from the Department of Health, so are they trying to entrap him?
Yeah, I can't speak to that.
I don't want to give this Department of Health any more
But I don't
funds.
think those were local health district. I don't think they had any involvement in that. I could be wrong. My understanding was that any official action, that would have either been through L&I or through the State Department of Health.
You brought this question up at the last health board meeting, and Rick Dawson said that they do not do that. They did not monitor that. It would have been L&I or the State Department of Health.
So Rick Dawson,
answered your question.
Yeah,
directly.
he said that they called him. He said that they called him on the phone. The initial phone call about removing the tables, and they got very pinpointed. He said, yes, we did call him. So he admitted they called him. Now, I could simply do a request act from the Department of Health and get their phone records and see if they called again. And do you want me to do that? I will.
Yeah, that's up to you.
I mean, we're taking everybody's face word, the word that they're being honest, but this guy's telling us one story, they're telling us another, and then Rick admitted that, yes, they did call him. So, to me, that brings suspicion to the situation. I think we need to know. And if it's the State Department of Health, what the heck are they doing in our county harassing our businesses?
As I recall from the meeting, Mr. Dawson said they called to provide information and explain to the owner that the state rules that were in effect were and outlined those rules. My recollection is he was very clear about the fact that they do not and did not have any role in any kind of enforcement, that it was providing information so that the gentleman knew what the guidelines were. Commissioner Cook, is that your recollection as well? Okay. We were all there in the same meeting. Okay.
That would be something for the board to consider when.
Yeah. With respect to moving forward, Mr. Chairman, I think we need to consider whether we want to apply to move to phase 2 or whether we want to apply to move to what's been sort of colloquially referred to as 1.5, where we would identify specific businesses and industries that we think can operate under the current environment. I'm willing to support either approach, whatever the majority of the board feels we want to do. I think that based on the state's criteria, it's extremely unlikely that we would get favorable consideration for a phase 2. And I worry about us burning time waiting for that process to go through when we might be able to get a 1.5 plan approved more quickly while working on a phase 2 to come shortly after. The governor increased the 14-day cumulative total case count from the previous, I think, unrealistic number of 10 to 25. But at last check, we're still many times above that threshold. Benton County is moving to a phase 2, I understand, but their delta between case counts was they were permitted, I think, 50, roughly 200,000 population, 25 per 100,000. And their case count at the time that I checked was 62. So they were much closer to the threshold than us being 5 or 6 times over, if I remember. So phase 2, if we could get it, I'd say great. I worry that we'll burn valuable time trying to get it. And I don't see any provision where you submit for phase 2 and they come back and say, well, we can't do phase 2, but we'll give you 1.5. I think they come back and say no, and then you have to start another process.
I think our largest problem at this point is Tyson and Coyote Ridge.
Well, Tyson has already fallen off of the 14-day window for the count. Obviously, if we count those Tyson cases, we're over. But I think we're past the 14 days for when they happened. So Coyote Ridge, as much as I would hope that the state would say we're not going to count those against you because that's a state facility, the fact of the matter is their criteria is that the cases are counted based on where the individual resides. And obviously those inmates reside at Coyote Ridge, which obviously is in our county, as do the workers. So I think, again, we could try and fight that battle, but I think we would burn valuable time and lose. So in my mind, the counting really effectively starts probably, depending on what happens over the next week or so, we might be able to include Coyote and be close enough. As soon as we get 14 days past Coyote Ridge, hopefully our numbers will be more plausible. But again, I want to be clear. To me, time is of the essence. We ought to take our best shot and be careful not to overreach for fear of burning valuable time.
I could support that.
Let me add that, and I've asked this question twice to the health department, what's the accuracy of their test? And both times they came back and said 63%. We're basing all this on a 63% accuracy. People are losing their lives, their livelihoods, and we have a test that's just 3 notches above failing when I went to school. So regardless of 1.5 or 2, there's going to be people lose everything that they've ever worked for while we fiddle around and play this game with the governor. Instead of taking a hard stance and standing up, then let other counties stand with us.
So, Commissioner Didier, if you'd care to share, what is your proposal?
Open the county up.
By what?
Make the move.
By what authority?
By what authority? We're elected by the constituents of Franklin County. We're the executive and the legislative branch, and we're opening our county up for business. And I make that motion that we open this is the 3rd time. The first time you gave it a second.
I did.
I had a little hope for you then, Brad. I move that we open Franklin County up for business on a basis of a test that is only 63% accurate, and we get our county back up and running.
So, Mr. Chairman, I have no intention of seconding the motion. Let me be clear why. We are the elected representatives for the people of Franklin County, and our first duty is their best interest. And as we saw last time, we take a vote like this, and we effectively lie to 100,000 people in this county by giving the clear impression that we have the authority to open the county, which prompts them to open their business, which prompts them to lose their business license and get a minimum $10,000 fine from LNI. I'm not going to lie to the people of this county. I'm not going to mislead them. The reality is we have a set of constraints put upon us by a duly elected governor, given power by the duly elected legislature of the state. I don't like the power he was given. I don't like the statute that the legislature approved. But as I've said many times before, Doesn't matter how angry we get, we are not in a position to pick and choose the laws that we're going to follow. We all took the same oath. The law is clear. It's been challenged. The authority exists. And if we tell the people of this county that the county is open for business, and we imply that we have that authority, because let's be honest, the majority of the citizens in the county don't know in fine detail what authority this board has and doesn't. We do not have the legal authority to open Franklin County. If individual citizens with full knowledge want to open their business and assume that risk, God bless them. That's America. It's their choice. It's their risk. But I'm not going to participate in misleading the people into thinking that we somehow have the authority to let them open their business. That's just not proper.
Let me ask you a question then, Commissioner Peck. When you took your oath, did you take an oath to RCWs or did you take an oath to the Constitution?
You know, Commissioner,
I'm asking you a question. What did you take an oath to?
Commissioner Didier.
Did you take an oath to the legislature over there, or did you take an oath to the Constitution of the Washington State and the Constitution of the United States of America? Simple question, yes or no?
Commissioner Didier, first off, your bullying tactics don't work here. Number two, I took an oath many, many times wearing an active duty uniform, serving in hostile areas, serving around the world. I don't need you or anybody else to debate or lecture on the Constitution. The oath I took is exactly the same one that you and Commissioner Cook took. Okay?
Yes, I know.
That's right.
I know
It's to uphold. That's right.
It's the Constitution.
Uphold the state laws. You might have missed that part.
Constitution of the United States of America and the Constitution of Washington State.
Well, I'll close my comments by inviting you to reread the oath.
Motion lacks a second. I would support going after 1.5 at this point with the carrying on, heading for 2 as soon as the numbers show that availability.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer that, given that time is of the essence, perhaps we share with Mr. Johnson under 1.5 the opportunity to identify specific industries that we think can open now under the current circumstances without undue public risk. In my mind, one of those clearly is the residential building trades for construction of homes. They've demonstrated that they can work at safe distances and still get houses built. I'm sure there are others that ought to be on that list and would invite further comment and suggestions. And then together with that, because time is of the essence, I'd like to see us have a brief special meeting later this week to approve the application. I don't know how long it'll take to move it through the health district to get their concurrence, so it'd be premature to set the time and date for that meeting, but perhaps we can get feedback from them today as to how quickly they think they could respond, and then maybe toward the end of the week do this rather than waiting next Tuesday. I mean, there are businesses that every day counts.
Okay.
Do you have a particular time, date you want to try to do that?
Well, given it's a special meeting, the pre-announcement timelines are not as long as they are normally.
24 hours is all.
24 hours. I would like for you to be in contact with the health district, find out how quickly they could return a position on an application, and then ideally set it for 24 hours following that. So if we talk to them today and they say they could respond, say by Wednesday, then I'd want to have the meeting 24 hours later, which could be Thursday afternoon. These are just notional based on when they could respond, but I don't want to wait till next Tuesday to take this up if we can get the paperwork together sooner. I've mentioned residential construction as one of the identified. I'd be interested in whether or not my fellow commissioners have any suggestions for other businesses, trades that should be included in an application under 1.5.
What's our legalities as far as Franklin County compared to City of Pasco? We're Franklin County unincorporated, or are we Franklin County 100%? I don't know that we can open up City of Pasco.
I think these are county by county decisions. I think
the waivers are by county. Whether or not the city, as a municipal corporation in their own right, would be required to open up or not, I don't know. My guess, and I probably shouldn't guess, my guess is they probably wouldn't have to, but I would certainly hope that they would. But I don't know that for a fact. We'd have to follow that up.
So at this point, basically, it would be unincorporated Franklin County.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think it would apply to the whole county. Whether or not municipal corporations, cities, could then adopt rules and not open, I don't know. If they have that authority, I would certainly hope that they would not, and that they would move with us and open.
Well, I agree to that, but...
Okay.
Cities can be more restrictive than what the governor's required. They just can't be less restrictive.
Right.
Yeah, and I think therein lies the authority. But again, I would hope that they would move with us. I've seen emails and correspondence from a variety of people, as I know you have, and there are a variety of businesses that have been identified. I think anyone who's doing construction, the notion of someone who is using earth-moving equipment to prep sites for buildings certainly ought to come under the construction trades as being included. Some have suggested hair salons. You heard Mr. Mahoney this morning say he needs a haircut, can't get one. I don't think that's our motivating factor, but I'd be interested in the board's feelings as to whether or not hair salons are appropriate to open at this point. Again, all of this is just specific businesses that I understand we can list under a 1.5 application, and we've already seen things open up, I think thanks to our president, on the area of religious freedoms and religious gatherings. I no longer have any vested interest in the event center business. I want to put that on the record. It does make me wonder if you can have a congregation of 200 church-going members. Can you have a assembly of 200 people attending a wedding ceremony, which some would argue is a religious event? I'm posing these as questions, not necessarily suggestions.
I guess I missed that. Did the governor open up for 200 people?
No. That was notional. Thanks for pointing that out. Just
Last
conceptual
stuff.
stuff. Yeah.
I think it's
Trying to move the ball forward.
Yeah.
Let's don't get the public getting 200 together and getting in trouble.
Well, that's why the clarification is appreciated. Are there other businesses or industries that anyone can think of that we ought to include in this 1.5?
I don't know, PF&S, I did an interview with them. They got somebody called in a complaint, unidentified person, that they had somebody visit their store, one person. And I went and did an interview. They get one every 3 days, and they do 95 to 98% of their business through the internet. And they got that letter saying that they could be fined $10,000, and they also got a letter from L&I saying they're going to get their license pulled if they don't stop.
So
Now, why are they even getting a letter?
PF&S, did you say?
PF&S Railway. It's a train store out there on Ione Road. Now, why are they getting these letters, threatening letters? They wouldn't even given a courtesy call to see if it was legit.
So is there a category of business that would include them that we could identify in an application?
I'd say all businesses. That'd be my category.
retail establishments that are currently.
We got
prohibited.
Lowe's, we got Walmart, we got hundreds of people in them stores, and they have one person come in and they're getting this letter.
Perhaps the more effective approach at this point, Mr. Chairman, is to have each of us convey to Mr. Johnson today any business categories that we'd like to include in a 1.5 application so that we all have an opportunity to bring these suggestions forward.
Okay.
Get them into the application, get the application moved through the health district and moved to the state as quickly as we possibly can.
All right.
One final note, I've been invited to participate with the, I guess that's the TRIDEC. Carl Dye, he has a weekly, calls it Coffee with Carl. It's an online forum to discuss kind of where the county is and what our intent is with respect to applying for variances. They've invited myself, Jared McPherson invited my counterpart in Benton County and a couple of representatives from the Benton Franklin Health District this Friday morning to participate in that discussion. That's all I have, Commissioners. We do have one caller on the line for public comment.
Okay, well, let's get them on the line
Okay.
then, and then we have open comment here in a moment.
Good morning. Is this Stephanie?
It is.
Hi, Stephanie. It's Keith. You are in the Board of County Commissioners meeting. Welcome.
Well, thanks for having me, Keith. I appreciate the meeting today and everything that's been said and spoken about. One of my roles at the Chamber is to answer the rapid response line. And that line has been set up to help businesses connect to the resources that are available to them to help them stay on their feet. I appreciated both Brad's comments and Commissioner Didier. I feel like the difference sometimes between staying open or having to lose everything that they've worked for these small businesses can sometimes be just a few $1,000s. Brad had mentioned earlier that the quickest and best outcome for the citizens is what your goal would be for the CARES Act money. I would definitely support a small micro grant program. The businesses that I talk to on a daily basis are struggling just to come up with what they need to follow the governor's guidance as far as PPEs and the funds available for what they'll need to get their business, the doors open again. So we've got businesses that are really, really struggling in Franklin County, and we've got some funds that are available to us. And a $2,000 microloan really, truly might make the difference between staying open or losing everything they've worked their whole life for. So I would ask that you might set aside the idea to rent out the HAPO Center for your meetings in lieu of supporting small businesses in Franklin County. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Mr. Chairman, excellent points made by the caller. Would like to point out that the suggestion for the HAPO Center was on the premise that Mr. Johnson just told us we had $5.2 million and we weren't sure we were going to be able to use it all. So if in fact that can be funneled to micro grants, I would agree that that's a higher priority. If there are additional funds available, then I would use them for HAPO. Appreciate the opportunity to clarify those priorities.
And Keith, I'd really like to add that anybody that will accept these micro grants have got to realize there are strings attached, and all those strings need to be revealed to these businesses before they take the money.
Certainly.
Yep.
Public comment.
As far as as giving money to the Regional Chamber of Commerce, I don't really consider them a regional chamber. I consider them a Kennewick-Richland Chamber of Commerce and not a Pasco-Franklin County Chamber. We have our own chamber, and I think that maybe a contact should be made with them to see if they can administer the grant program and make sure that money's spent in Franklin County. If we give it to the regional, I can guarantee you we're not going to get that money coming back to us. A share of it is going to end up going to Benton County. And as far as trying to get open, as much as I don't particularly like certain people on the Benton County Commissioners, I think you guys need to work together. Our two counties are intertwined as far as businesses and commerce goes between this area. We're a metropolitan area of 300,000 people. We're not just 100,000 in Franklin County that never goes over to Benton County and vice versa. I would like to see us apply for 2.0 with Benton County if that's what they're going to do and coordinate it together. And you can tell the health department they're going to get on board and you're going to cut the hell out of their budget next year. They'll get on board. This big thing up there at Coyote Ridge is a state institution. They don't pay taxes. So how can they even consider that part of our population? Yeah, I understand they do, but it's not truly Franklin County population. It's a separate state entity and should be counted towards the state's numbers and not our numbers here in the county. And that's enough for me to say today. I will be back next Tuesday. I don't care what the edict is. So you're going to have Raymond escort me out.
So, Mr. Chairman, I just note for those listening that the authority on the reopening is by county, individual county. And secondly, my perception is that Benton County would not likely welcome a joint application given that our numbers are so much higher than theirs. Just an observation. But the state rules that we're unfortunately obliged to submit our application under are by individual county, not multiples.
Further comments?
Do you have one caller coming back?
Rocky, one. Okay.
Okay. I believe this is Stephanie calling back. Stephanie, is that you?
It is.
Welcome back. Just go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to briefly mention that the Tri-City Open and Safe initiative was begun and is in partnership with TriDec, the Regional Chamber, Visit Tri-Cities, Pasco Chamber, and the Hispanic Chamber, as well as other organizations. So this would not be a regional chamber type of administration of a micro grant. This would if in fact you did decide to use that CARES Act money for micro grants for Franklin County, that's exactly who it would go to. It would just be administered through this collaborative initiative, Tri-City Open and Safe, which includes the Pasco Chamber and also the Hispanic Chamber. I just wanted to make sure that that was mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rocky?
My name is Rocky Mullen. I come before you today as a local business owner. And my question is, Is there a waiver for the mask? Are these going to be mandatory? One, personally, I don't believe the masks work. I've had my doctors tell me that they do no good, and I actually believe that they are detrimental to the person wearing them. It is not healthy to wear a mask, breathing in your own bacteria all day long. And there are cases of people now getting sick from wearing masks. And as a business owner, I don't feel in good conscience to make my employees mandatorily wear a mask. It should be their option. If they want to, I am fine with that. But to make it mandatory, I, in good conscience, where I don't believe it's healthy to wear a mask all day, I can't ask my employees to do something that I don't feel is in their best interest. And that's my point today. We need to do something. I don't know if there's a waiver where we can sign out of it, but this isn't right. As a business owner, we are taxed, permitted, fined, regulated over and over again, and now they are asking us to put our employees' health in jeopardy. And it's wrong.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rocky.
Okay. Anybody else on the phone?
I believe so.
Anything else, commissioners?
I was just thinking back through the various opinions I've heard from business owners about opening them up, and when it comes to dining in restaurants, one of the concerns expressed by the state is having large seating areas with people in close proximity. I don't certainly understand why they couldn't allow those activities with what is now known as appropriate social distancing. So I think one of the things I'll add, Mr. Johnson, is for restaurants that are able to provide seating with appropriate social distancing, that we ought to permit those as well. We have a number that are operating on walk-in takeout business, and so the same number of people are coming in. So presumably the only additional risk would be people being present at the same time. And as we've been told, as people come and go, they leave germs, and the things that they touch and the air that they breathe. And so if they can open up seating to give some reasonable separation, that to me seems like a compromise we ought to pursue as well.
And I think that goes along with their, like I say, the barbers and hairstylists, because I know that my local in Connell has got one chair, one person doing it, and if you're waiting to get in, you got a chair to sit over there that is separation. So anything further? Okay. Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you. Make it through that storm all right, Rocky?